transforms you as a person to have tattoos on your body. I know that for me, it made me feel like a completely different person. I often describe it to people as feeling a bit like armor. It somehow feels like it adds to your sense of self and makes you feel more like yourself than you maybe did before. It contributes to your sense of identity. And so there's a desire for that is on top of the desire to have pretty art that you're looking at that you like. And so I think the desire to wear the art is more powerful than the desire to just own it.
Tell us about how you chose the canvas, skin as your canvas. What was it that attracted you to that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, other than that I did when I was in year 11, I want to say, I did one of those, I had to do a research assignment for art at school, and it was one of those things where you study one subject for an entire year. So you had to pick a research subject, and I chose body art, and I'm not entirely sure why. I was into alternative stuff, I had pink hair and a nose ring, and, I was just into sort of, I guess, alternative aesthetics and alternative music and all that sort of stuff. But I didn't really know people with tattoos. I certainly didn't know anybody with custom tattoos. The tattoos I had seen were pretty flash off the wall type little bits and pieces, But it was, for whatever reason, I chose to study that for that research assignment. And in the process of studying that, I bought a whole bunch of tattoo magazines because they were the most readily, you could just go to the news agency and buy those. And I found a few books as well. But it was the magazines that really blew me away, because they were showing what people were capable of now. It wasn't sort of books tend to be slightly older kind of material, but the magazines were sort of showing what people were doing right now. And at the time, when I was sort of 15 years old, I remember quite specifically some of the artists that were showcased in the first magazine that I bought, and the stuff was mind-blowing. It was just, there's people doing not necessarily my thing, but people doing portraits and, just crazy, brightly coloured, creative stuff that I just had no idea was possible. And it just looked like sheer wizardry to me. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I just thought it looked amazing. And I just knew at the very least right then that I was going to get a lot of tattoos. But I think it dawned on me pretty quickly after that this was something I could probably do, especially once, I think at first I thought it was that the idea was a bit intimidating. I saw the work on the skin, I just went, whoa, that's a lot of responsibility to be permanently marking people, and that seemed scary to me. And so that wasn't necessarily immediately what I wanted to do. But once I got my first tattoo when I was 15, which was a little bit cheeky. I was at an adult re-entry school for year 11 and 12, which meant that I was friends with people who were a little bit older, and some of them had tattoos. And so it was kind of easy for me to sneak out and get one done. But then I started getting some custom ones when I was a little bit older, and just watching someone do them on me, I realized that I could do it too. It just kind of took all the mystique out of it. I realized that it wasn't so scary after all. These people were just ordinary people like me who could draw well, and they'd learned to use this particular medium to make their art. And so it kind of just made me realize I could definitely do this. And I want to do it, and I think I'd be good at it. And something about the way that ink is applied to the skin, some part of me just knew that it would work for the way that I draw. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's I just kind of had this intense feeling that I knew I could do this, whereas there's a lot of other things that I love. I love watercolor painting. I love the look of watercolor paintings. I've done a lot of watercolor paintings, but I find them unbelievably stressful. The process of making them is really stressful for me, which sounds ridiculous that tattoos wouldn't be, and that painting on paper would be, but it is. I find that I don't have enough control because the paint seeps into the paper. It kind of takes its own life. It takes on its own life and does its own thing. And I hate that because I like to control everything. Mm-hmm. So there's something about the way that tattoo ink is applied, because it's very deliberate. I just knew that it would work for what I like to do. And I was right about that. It felt really comfortable for me once I started doing it. So some part of me just, it felt like a real calling. I know this is the job for me, Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's somewhat a little bit more forgiving as well. Like you were saying, is that the control of it, where with something like a watercolor, you're at the mercy of other elements of it, that part of the aesthetic is just to let it do its own thing. Where with tattoos, you are able to layer it as well, and you can be a little bit more meticulous and a little bit more delicate with the application of a tattoo.
Yeah, yeah, it's all very deliberate. And I mean, on some level, it's very permanent in the same way that putting ink on paper is permanent. Like if you draw with pen,
Mm.
that's very, you're not getting black pen off paper once you put it on there. So it's similar in that regard. But it is also that little bit forgiving in that you can do multiple sessions. You can you can layer a little bit, not an awful lot, because once the ink's in there, it's in there. And, you can't um, necessarily layer a lot of colours on top of other colours. You can do that a little bit. Um, but it is just very, nothing goes into the skin that you didn't deliberately put there. There's no opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to just go off on its own and have its own. I mean, the body does that. Like there is the possibility that the body could react to the ink or that the person is not going to look after it. There's all kinds of factors that aren't within my control. But the process of making the art is. And yeah, it is an imperfect canvas, like you have freckles and hairs and moles and scars and lumps and bumps and all kinds of things that contribute to it not necessarily being an ideal canvas in the same way that a blank piece of paper or canvas would be. But that doesn't really bother me. It's just kind of it's just part of the medium. But as far as the way that I make the art, I'm in control of what goes into the skin. And that, yeah, is weirdly less intimidating to me than trying to make art on paper that I feel, yeah, I feel I have less control over. Yeah,
Yeah.
weird.
So you started your attraction to tattooing came at a time when you were studying art. So you already had some artistic inclinations there. Would you say that tattooing was something that spurred it on, or were you already heavily into art and were just finding ways of channeling it, and it just sort of met at this point where you just when you came to tattooing, and it just sort of launched the creativity for you?
It was definitely, I was always the kid that was endlessly drawing and knew from, apparently I was saying from the time I was 3 that I was always going to be an artist. It was just the only thing I ever cared about. I had brief love affairs with other things like playing drums and stuff like that, but really art was always my thing, and I was always pretty good at it. I always kind of it was the one thing I could always get praise for. I wasn't a very popular kid at school or anything. I was kind of dorky and fat, and I wasn't good at making friends. I was socially awkward, and so drawing was the one thing that I always got positive attention for, and that I always just wanted to endlessly do. My parents always say that I was happy as long as I was really easy as a kid, because as long as I had paper and textures, I was happy. They never really needed to buy me a lot of toys. As long as I had a water paper and a packet of textures, I could entertain myself. And I was forever doing art classes and various, anything arty I was into doing. I would go do, like, I don't know, sometimes I'd make stuff out of clay or whatever, but it was all, and I'd paint and whatever, but it was always something arty that I was into. And so it was definitely always what I planned to do. I think my parents for a long time sort of thought, maybe art's more of a hobby and you should go to uni and get a proper job. And, so they were kind of, maybe you should study graphic design or, something's like an official job sort of thing that was artistic. And I dreaded in the back of my mind that I might have to do something like that, but I never really wanted to. And so when I found tattooing, it just felt like, no, this is the thing. It's like it is a job. It's a legitimate job. It's a trade, which means you're not making art and then desperately hoping people buy it in a gallery or something. Like it's a job. Someone comes to me and commissions a piece of art from me. So it's not, I guess technically you're sort of a freelancer in the sense that there's no guaranteed income, but it is still a job. It's a service you're offering people, as opposed to, a lot of painters or musicians or other artists sort of have to make art first and then hope that people like it and hope people are willing to pay for it. And tattooing's not like that. It's just a job. So you can just, as long as you're pretty good at it, you can find people who are willing to pay you to do it for them, which is a luxury as an artist, because a lot of art forms, you can't do that. Yeah,
it's such a different degree of appreciation for the art as well, because I could go out. There are definitely a lot of artists out there that I have a lot of admiration and respect for, and I could just, if I feel inclined to, I can purchase one of their pieces and put it up on the wall. But to have an artist and wanting to give them my hard-earned money to put their work on me permanently, that's a different level of respect altogether.
yeah.
So that's gotta, you gotta be pretty chuffed with that.
Yeah, look, it's I guess flattering would be the word in a sense that
Hmm.
it's yeah, it's quite an honor to have people um, who are willing to ask that of you. It's funny also that I think there is a phenomenon where people have more of an inclination to pay for art that's on their bodies than they have. I mean, obviously, lots of people don't like tattoos and would never get one. But as far as within my clientele, and even just from my own perspective as someone who loves art, I have absolutely invested a lot more money in my tattoos than I have in art that's on my wall. Um,
That's a good point, actually. I never considered that, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
yeah, not everyone who would pay for tattoos would pay the same sort of money for art on their walls, unless they just don't like tattoos. So, but people
Hmm.
who get tattoos tend to not invest the same sort of money in a painting or a drawing. I've been hoping to get. Sorry,
So some riffraff happening over in
yeah,
Adelaide now.
sorry about that. I've got the door open because it lets the light in, but it's yeah, it might be a bit noisy sometimes. I'm quite close to a main road. Um, yeah, I think as far as like I've been hoping that I can attract more clients for commissioned drawings or paintings, um, partly because I do so many tattoos that I don't get enough opportunities to draw other things, and I would love to do art
Hmm.
more often that is for a different purpose. Um, I like drawing with colored pencils. I love doing still life paintings with oils. I really don't get enough time to do that sort of thing. I used to do classes years ago um, where I could, carve time out of my week to go and work on a painting, but it's much harder to do with kids around at home and stuff like that. The oil paints are pretty toxic, and but I'd love to do a little bit more of that sort of stuff, and it would make it a lot easier to find time to paint and to draw other things if somebody commissioned a piece from me. So I've been
Hmm.
thinking I need to find ways to let people know that hey, for the same money you could spend on a tattoo, you could also get a piece of art for your wall that is commissioned in the same way that a tattoo is. That is kind of a whether it's sometimes people get a tattoo that's of like their wedding bouquet or it's some other sentimental um, you know plant or bouquet of flowers or whatever it is. Um, if somebody wasn't inclined to get a tattoo of that, they could get the same
Yeah, they
sort of
could still.
thing
Yeah.
as a painting. Yeah, and I've never really been very good at marketing myself, but I sort of feel like that is something that that I and other artists could absolutely do. But I feel like it's less common for people to commission those sorts of works than it is for them to commission it as a tattoo. Maybe that's just my perspective as a tattooist that I see people.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges as an artist as well. That in order for you to get to the point where you're at and being commissioned for a very particular style and aesthetic that you have created over the years, and it's taken you so many years to be able to be recognized for that, and a lot of hard work and just honing in and narrowing down your skills, that you almost have had to forego a lot of the other disciplines that you love, that you put a lot of your passion into. And it's, and then to get to the point where you're at, you're almost now just identified as being a tattoo artist rather than just
Yeah,
as a creative in general.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, you sort of not everybody realizes, I guess, that your skills are transferable to other styles.
Mm.
And that's not always the case either. Like I do know people who can do beautiful tattoos, but they don't make art outside of that. There's so many different styles now. There's people who do these amazing portrait tattoos, but they're working from a photograph and they're incredible at doing that. But they don't necessarily make art that's not directly from photographs. And so not everybody does make art outside of their tattooing, but lots of tattoo artists do as well. Lots of them do beautiful illustration work or paintings or whatever, or sometimes completely other mediums. I'm not sure why it is that people seem more inclined to commission works for their own body. I think there is I mean, it's maybe partly that there is a desire to own the art that doesn't just come from wanting to look at it, but comes from a place of wanting to say something with their appearance is the
Mm.
wrong word, but to say something with their body, that it transforms you as a person. You would know this because you have tattoos. It transforms you as a person to have tattoos on your body. I know that for me, it made me feel like a completely different person to have
Yeah.
it. I often describe it to people as feeling a bit like armor. It somehow feels like it adds to your sense of self and makes you feel more like yourself than you maybe did before. It contributes to your sense of identity. And so there's a desire for that is on top of the desire to have pretty art that you're looking at that you like. And so I think the desire to wear the art is more powerful than the desire to just own it, you know?
Own it, yeah.
And
No,
I
no,
think
of
that that's
course, that
not
makes a lot of
necessarily a
sense.
strange thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. So you would say that the commissioning the work, it's not necessarily entirely just for the art, but it is a way of adding to the persona or altering the persona as well, and on a superficial level more than a deep internal level.
Well, interestingly though, I actually find certainly with my clientele and different artists are going to have different experiences of this. Um, but with my clientele, the vast majority of people that I tattoo get tattoos in places that are not they're not necessarily very visible or they're not there to be shown off. And I think it's really interesting that um, there are certainly tattoos that people get because they want to look cool, right? They tough stickers.
Mm.
They want to look a certain way. They want people to know that they've got tattoos. That's an element of the tattoo world. But there's a whole other motivation to get tattooed that I think has nothing to do with what other people think of you. And I find that really fascinating because I feel that myself, that my desire for tattoos doesn't come from wanting people to see them. And that's the same. Most of my clients feel the same way. A lot of them don't care if anybody sees them. In some cases, they're worried that people will see them and they actually want them to remain private. And so there is something about the way we feel about ourselves, regardless of how other people, because like, say from a personal perspective, I don't think that my tattoos make me, for instance, more attractive. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty certain that there's a lot of people who probably think, oh gosh, what a shame she covered herself in those tattoos. Aren't they ugly? You know what I mean? Like, I know that it doesn't necessarily contribute to people thinking positively about me, but that's not why I got them. Um, I also got the vast majority of my tattoos after I got married, so it's kind of, none of that played a role in any of, the desire to be seen a certain way was really not a factor in it. It was some kind of internal desire to have them, and I don't even entirely know why. It's just a really intense, like an inclination that I have that I just, and I still have that desire sometimes. Like tattoos aren't getting them is not a huge priority for me at the moment because I've got 3 little kids and they're too expensive for me to be investing that kind of money in right now. But I still think about tattoos that I'd like to get. I still think about like, oh, I'd love to have this on here. And, I see other people's art that I love and I'd love to collect a piece by that person and that person. And I just think it's a really interesting thing that I have nothing invested whatsoever in the idea that people would see me a certain way because of my tattoos. And half the time that most of them aren't that visible. I don't go out of my way to show them off. I find that, I'm frequently in the company of people who don't particularly like them anyway, so there's no incentive to show them to people. It's coming from some completely different internal place, this desire to have them. And 9 times out of 10, I find that with my clients too, that sometimes they're even self-conscious about having the tattoo because of what the people in their workplace think, or sometimes even what their partner thinks. It's not uncommon for people to get tattoos when their partner doesn't like them. Yeah, I've often thought about why that might be, that people have this drive to decorate themselves that doesn't come from a desire for other people to see those decorations on them and to form a particular opinion about them.
Well, the last 20 years, everything has changed culturally because if you think about, you've spoken a bit about the history of tattoos and how a lot of cultures embraced it, and they would have different reasons why they would tattoo, whether it's different, not necessarily even just tattooings, but all sorts of body markings, and they would be pretty well reasoned as to why they would get it, and very few of them would just purely be for decorative purposes. They would have a lot of significance and a lot of meaning behind it, and it would be tied in deeply to a lot of the cultural rituals. And then I suppose that in the last, I want to say maybe 20 years, that things have changed enormously, that there's no... The status quo for tattoos, or why you would get a tattoo, or what a tattoo should represent, how it should look, has just completely opened up, and it's very much to each their own, very individualistic as to what you want to get tattooed, where you would want to get it tattooed, and sometimes it might have a really deep and significance, deep significance, sometimes it might not at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's and that's probably partly, I guess, living in uh, a multicultural society as well. That there's uh, no imagery has a set, uh, obvious kind of significance to anybody. Um, yeah, all of that's gone out the window. So it has, in many ways, that's a beautiful thing. It's freed people up to just to get whatever they want, and to, some people still choose to get tattoos that have that significance in their own culture, whether they live within that culture or not. You get people, maybe someone who lives in Australia but has Samoan heritage, and they might still choose to get traditional Samoan tattoos or something like that. But nobody around them is necessarily going to understand what those mean, and that, I guess, doesn't really matter to people. You're not getting them for this kind of status in your community or whatever. So it has opened them right up to just being something that can be purely aesthetic, or they can be personally meaningful, but they're not. I guess they don't have a cultural meaning in the same way that they used to. Some people
Yeah.
still perceive that there is. I mean, there's certainly no hard and fast, uh, significance to tattoos anymore. People probably 20 years ago would have said that, tattoos would indicate that you're part of, a criminal underclass, or that you used to be in the army, or, they probably used to be perceived as having some sort of cultural significance. But really now, it's a free for all. Like, it doesn't indicate class or status in any way.
Yeah, no, absolutely
You know,
not at all, not at all.
yeah.
The spectrum is so broad these
Mm.
days. I do wonder though, because you know what? Because I'm 40 now, and I got mine. I think it was early 20s, mid 20s, and it came at about the time when, what was that show on MTV? Like LA Ink and Miami Ink.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Yeah, and I think that was that was the catalyst for once it hit mainstream, and
Yes.
once celebrities started adorning tattoos, it just became very much culturally acceptable for anyone to get
True.
tattooed. And I do wonder though, because they are permanent, how much we've considered that, because so much of our lives these days are so fickle, and we'll change our mind on a dime. But I'm just wondering how much, like, we're forced to live with it. Of course, there's you have your regrets or you don't. But I wonder how much of that's going to play into, like, our generation now, when we grow up and are grandparents, and then, like, all these little kids are going to have grandparents that are just covered in tattoos. How, whether or not that's going to have some sort of rebound effect, and fewer people, or the next generation.
I certainly think there are lots of people who don't, and I was one of them, certainly when I was younger. And we ultimately can't know who we're going to be when we're older. No one can tell the
Yeah.
future, and so all we can do is make an educated guess that we would like to make something permanent, but nobody truly knows that they will not regret their choices. And in some ways, I think that's a good thing, where it's like you can't control the future. You are not in control, right? Sometimes you do have to kind of leave things, whatever you want to call it, fate, God, whatever. You are not in control of your life, and so sometimes it's good to accept that you have to relinquish that control and just kind of, choices anyway, knowing that you might regret them. But there are choices that are more. It's easy to see that they're regrettable than others, right? Like, there are definitely times when people request tattoos, and you kind of go, you are not going to be happy about this when you're older. And I see tattoos all the time that I just kind of go, wow, you're unlikely to want this even in a year from now, let alone 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Have you had to turn down jobs? Have you told them no?
I haven't for a while now, not very often. When I was younger, like when I would get a broader range of different styles coming, like people coming to me for lots of different styles of tattooing, but also younger clientele, because most of my clients now are actually older. I would say the average age of my clientele is somewhere between 40 and 50. I actually tattoo a lot of older women, especially. So I don't tattoo a lot of people in their sort of 20s anymore.
Yeah.
But when I did, even sort of late teens, early 20s, people would come to me for things where I did have to sort of say to them, look, I don't think this is a great idea. And sometimes that's not to be insulting or something. It's just more that, I remember a girl coming to me. She had lost her father, and she wanted a big tattoo on her neck. She didn't have a lot of tattoos, so this was something she had very big feelings at the time. She was in a lot of pain, and she wanted a big, painful, obvious tattoo in memory of her father. And on one hand, you can see that that's a really understandable thing to want to do, but also very much in the moment, very much coming from a place of grief and pain. And that's not what you want to remember forever. So, to get a tattoo in honor of your father is a nice idea. But I don't think that you want to mark that pain on yourself forever in a way that is also very, this was someone who didn't have a career and didn't know what she wanted to do and all that sort of stuff. It's like, this is just not on a more practical level a great idea. Even I find
some life coaching.
Yeah, well, there's a bit of that involved, really, with tattooing. It is one of those things where you know, people often liken it to hairdressing, in that people come to their tattooist and they just open up about a lot of things. And people do get tattoos for cathartic reasons too. They come to relieve pain or to acknowledge a particular moment in time, whether that's a positive thing or a painful thing. Tattooing is very much connected to what people are going through emotionally, for sure. And so, yeah, that there is I feel personally like I have some responsibility to help people make decisions that they're not going to regret, because I know which ones I regret too. And I don't have massive regrets about my tattoo collection. I've definitely got things I would never get again. And I got a lot of my tattoos before a lot of stuff really kicked off, before there was, such an amazing array of work being done. I would definitely get different tattoos now. If I had blank arms again, I would get different tattoos. So there's regret because you did something really dumb or something really painful that you now feel the need to remove from your life entirely and erase. And there's a lot of people doing that, going and getting laser surgery on their tattoos to remove them. And then there's just like, well, that doesn't really represent who I am now, but whatever, I'm not that embarrassed about it. It's just something that I probably wouldn't get again, which is what most of my tattoos are.
Yeah, sort of like having scars, it's just a marker. Like this one here I have on my arm. I probably wouldn't get the same thing, but I do look back fondly of my time in mid-20s and the shit that I went through, and thought that, okay, you know what, it was good for the time, and I can reflect and have grown from that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's lots of things about your body that you have no control over, right? Like, you can't control the fact that you're going to age, you go bald, whatever. Like, there's things that happen to us that we're not in control of. And so the idea of trying to maintain control over your body is kind of silly. Even if you can look amazing for a certain amount of time in your youth, you're still going to age. And if you age with tattoos, you're still going to be wrinkly, and you're still going to not look as hot as you did when you were young. Even if you're a good-looking granny, you know what I mean? Like, you're still going to be old. Your skin is going to sag and wrinkle, and whether you have tattoos or not. And so there's a part of me that sort of thinks, people often say, oh, how are you going to feel about that when you're older? And it's like, well, I don't think anybody feels good about what happened to their body as they get older, right? Like, most people are not super happy about that. The fact that, their hair goes grey or falls out, and,
or what makes you think you're going to get to older anyway?
Well, there's that too. Yeah, you can't live thinking about plans for when you're an old person when you don't know if you'll ever become one. So yeah, for sure. Like, I think that being too caught up in how you're going to feel about things when you're older is kind of silly, because none of that's within our control. And having said that, there are definitely tattoos that are better ideas than others, or tattoos that are worse ideas than others. And ironically, for something that is permanent, there are trends, right, and fashions within tattooing.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny because the very nature of fashion is that it is constantly changing, and the very definition of a trend is that it's temporary, right? So it's kind of funny that people get tattooed in accordance with trends, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to speak to you about, with just with culture and how tattoos play into culture, because it is definitely like for a lot of people, they adorn it because it is a fashionable thing, and like you were saying, that we make decisions. Permanent decisions to something that is not necessarily a permanent ideal. With fashion, that there is a lot of fashion from what I can tell, is a result of counter fashion or counter culture.
Yeah.
That if there's a particular trend going one way, the next one is going to be completely opposing to that. And then with tattoos, I feel as though that tattoos just culturally is counter culture. That, as you were saying, that once upon a time it was something that maybe like someone rebellious would get, or it would be something that you would get to show that you're not like an anarchist, you're not conforming to the standards of culture, and then because of that, more people are getting it, and then that just almost becomes the norm. And you see so many people with tattoos that you might actually one day the rebound would be like, what, I actually don't want to get tattoos. I'm gonna do something different. So no, you're right. Like, and then when you have a lot of tattoos that are fashion, remember like once upon a time, maybe when about 20 years ago, when people were getting those black work tribal tattoos, like I don't think many of them would have much significance other than the fact that just to look a particular way.
People thought they looked cool at the time. Yeah, and they sort of mimicked tattoos that were meaningful in the cultures that they were sort of inspired by. So say the Polynesian style cultures have this sort of solid black work, mostly quite bold because often it was being done on browner skin, so it needed to be quite bold in order to be seen. Right. And also because of the tools they were using more primitive tattooing instruments, so the work was quite black and bold. And so I guess that tribal style tattooing was formed in a way to kind of try and reference that look without it necessarily being culturally significant. That it was a way of replicating the aesthetic without any of the significance attached to it. So, and I mean, that's a classic example of a style that was really big for a while and most people find really cringy in hindsight, years later. Although I think it's actually coming back around again as a trend because it is retro.
Of course, because it's kitschy. Yeah, I was just going to say I haven't seen too much of it, so they must just be wearing long sleeves around. But if it's cool again, okay.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a resurgence of it. Maybe not maybe not a whole arm or something, but I think people are starting to get little things in that.
Like a barbed wire.
Yeah, maybe
a barbed wire wrap.
Yep.
Or a tramp stamp.
Yeah, look, I would
coming back.
Honestly, if these things come back as kind of retro items,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I do think as long as people are genuinely responding to the artwork and they genuinely love it, I don't think getting tattooed in a way that is trendy is necessarily a huge drama. I would say that as far as inappropriate use of tattooing or sort of unwise use of tattooing is it gets a lot worse than just putting tattoos on people that are sort of trendy. There's definitely stuff that I see where I go, whoa, that's potentially psychologically harmful to you or other people in your future. Like there are definitely people doing tattoos that I sort of think, people probably don't really want to see that on you, and maybe if you have kids in the future, they don't want to see that on you.
Well, just stick with botanicals then. Just do your flowers, do your Australian native plants.
Well, that's plastic too, yeah.
So if you're just sticking to that and being able to create beautiful artwork, I think that that won't go away.
Yeah, certainly what I'm hoping for is that, and I mean, my art falls very short of a lot of my own ideals in terms of the artists that I admire from the past. The artwork that I think is, I guess, of the highest quality, in my opinion. I feel like my art falls quite short of it. But nonetheless, I try to be, in terms of what I'm hoping to achieve with my art, I'm hoping to at least make art that is not, that has some timeless quality to it, that doesn't have a sort of a flash in the pan kind of vibe about it, or that can evolve with people as they change over time. So if somebody, over time completely changes their whole attitude to life, to whatever, they can go through dramatic life changes, deaths in the family, they can join a religion, they can drop a religion, whatever it is they go through on a personal, through their personal journey, I would hope that their botanical tattoos can stay with them through that, because they They don't speak to anything other than the beauty of nature, and they might have personal that individual in terms of, I recently tattooed some birds on someone whose mum's a bird photographer, and so she's honouring her family with these beautiful birds on her body that her own mother photographed. That's really beautiful. That's not likely to be something she ever regrets. Her mum is going to be her mum. I don't see any reason why, even if she had a falling out with her mum, it's still her mum, right? Like, it's just these are things that I think it's fairly safe to document on your body without concern about the changes you might go through as a person, rendering those now embarrassing or irrelevant or whatever. Whereas there are certainly things, some of the tattoos that people do remove on a regular basis are, a more obvious one is images related to an involvement in a gang or a particular kind of criminal organization, whatever. Those things are obviously can be regrettable. People who get, certainly people who get stuff that's just really trendy and not of personal significance to them, people often remove that stuff because it becomes cringy and embarrassing because it's not trendy anymore. Some grand philosophical statement or some other kind of commentary that maybe seemed profound to them when they were younger but now seems hopelessly outdated as they become older.
Daft,
like those things, it's not uncommon for young people to get like a lyric from their favorite song or whatever, and those things might seem really meaningful at the time, but they're unlikely to be meaningful to you when you're 50. Whereas, I sort of feel like even if the reason you got a tattoo of a rose or some other botanical item, even if the reason you got it is not something you're going to carry through into your older age, then hopefully at least the sheer beauty of the flower itself and the fact that nature is beautiful will never change. I can't see that change. Humans have found nature beautiful forever, and so I can't see anybody ever really changing their mind about that. And so at a very minimum, no one's going to regret having a tattoo of a flower on them. People might regret the decision to get tattooed. That's something that you can't, that's not within your control. Some people decide they don't want to be a tattooed person anymore. And it doesn't matter what the tattoo is, whether it's a good tattoo or a bad tattoo. If someone decides that they don't want tattoos anymore, then, then
it's very. You found yourself a market, a clientele of what you're saying, that women age between 40 and 50. That's particularly niche, but you'll have to assume that your clients that have decided to get it, that they have sat on it for quite some time. It's not just like a childish adolescent decision that they made. And there is some sort of connection and a lot of thought that has been put into it. So their attachment with your tattoo, and yours in particular as well. Like I do want to stress that it's not just walking into a shop, flicking through a couple of books and just saying, "Give me that one." I think that with you have a very distinct style that really that it transcends just the idea of just getting a tattoo. I think that for those that want to get one of your tattoos, that it's been highly considered, and it's something that they are absolutely certain about. And I can't imagine that, like, your work is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. There's the way you use colors as well, that it's colorful but yet still earthy and natural. There's a lot of consideration that I can see that you've really thought about how you're going to develop this look that you want to apply on skin, and it works tonally really well. And so I can't imagine the clients just thinking any other way other than that there is significance. There's multi-layered significance in the work that you do, and also very very well thought through. Did you consider finding that particular market, or is it just something that just eventuated?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a completely I don't want to say accidental, but sort of. I didn't start tattooing plants because I saw a gap in the market and thought I'll be the plant lady. Do you know what I mean? Like, that wasn't at all what happened. And look, sometimes people do that where they kind of go, I can see, there's room for a niche here. I'm going to fill that hole. But that's not. I did kind of just I don't know, kind of wander. I started doing botanical illustration classes when I first moved to Melbourne, which was in about 2009. Because partly because I was interested in plants, I was actually reading a lot of books about psychedelics, and so I was reading like a bunch, Terence McKenna and a bunch of like people about mushrooms and all kinds of other psychedelic plants. Never been very interested in taking those, but very interested in reading other people's experiences with them. And that was just my thing at the time. I was reading a lot of those books, and I read a really interesting book called The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan, which was really eye-opening as well. That was just cool. It was kind of like a book framing the human relationship with plants from the perspective of what the plants are getting out of us, as opposed to framing it as what people are getting out of the plants. So talking about how certain plants will motivate people to propagate them and carry their seeds throughout the world because of what those us. And I just was interested in plants, and so I started doing botanical illustration classes, and that was also because I'd been frustrated for a long time with how little art instruction was involved in most art classes. So I'd been trying to find places to study art for a long time because I'm always interested in learning new things and improving. And I started doing like a Bachelor of Visual Arts when I was, like 18 or 19 at TAFE, and just found it so not at all what I was hoping for. It was very conceptual in its approach to art, and I was actually poo-pooed for having an interest in what the teacher described in my drawing class as mere realism. I was discouraged from pursuing realism and encouraged to loosen up and be more expressive. And I was like, oh, that's not actually what I want to do. I want to learn how to draw better. And I wanted to learn how to draw better with a view to being a tattooist. So I was like, well, this isn't going to help me. And so I'd been very frustrated with the lack of actual art instruction in terms of technique that was available in most art classes. And so I was always looking for opportunities to learn those skills, and I saw that was something that I could learn from botanical illustration classes, that they were teaching very particular technique in terms of achieving very specific realistic outcomes with, whether it's paintbrushes or pencil or whatever, they were teaching technique because that's what you cannot capture scientific realism without good technique. And so it actually was primarily motivated by that. Just like, here's a drawing class I can take where I get to draw plants, which is something I like to draw, and I can learn actual technique. And my teacher, I studied for years on and off doing botanical illustration classes with an amazing artist named Marley Moyer at the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. And she's just phenomenal. Her art's absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, it was the classes were all technique. There's no room for conceptual development in botanical art, right? You're drawing what's right in front of you, and you're capturing
just draw what you see
in as much detail as you can. Yeah, and so it was doing that. I think actually how I developed a reputation for doing those tattoos was that I was doing the botanical illustration classes, and I was writing about them on a blog that I had. That was just a personal blog back when blogs weren't a way to monetize. Like, it wasn't a way to sell stuff on Amazon. It was just like a blog. I was a journal, right? I was documenting my interests and things on this blog. And so I was blogging about the classes that I was doing and how much I was enjoying growing plants. And then, someone discovers the blog and comes in and says, oh, I'm a horticulturalist and I really want a tattoo of this particular plant. I heard you're interested in plants. Can you help me out? And then someone else came in and said, oh, I want a tattoo of he was a barista and wanted a tattoo of a coffee plant to represent his career as a barista. And his coffee shop that he'd opened. And so it just kind of snowballed. I just started getting more and more people coming to me for specifically botanical style tattoos. And because I really enjoyed doing them, I leaned into that. But it was quite a few years before I actually did explicitly botanical tattoos and botanical tattoos only. Like, I think for a long time I was still doing a bit of all kinds of things that interested me. And it was partly actually having children that made me realize you can't just do everything because you haven't got the time. Before I had children, I just did nothing but draw in my spare time. That was all I did. I spent all of my weekend just drawing the tattoos for the next week, and I would spend sometimes 10 hours on one drawing because I could. And I couldn't do that anymore. It was just like, you don't have this much spare time. So you might have to narrow things down a little bit. And luckily I had enough clientele that I could. So I could safely drop, pieces that were too onerous for me to draw, and just take on the ones that I knew I could handle, because I found the more I drew plants, the more I felt like I understood how to draw them well enough. Even if it was a plant I'd never drawn before, I sort of had some understanding of plant structure and how they grow, and I knew how to find images. I now try to take most of my own reference photos if I can. I can't always, but I try to provide as much of my own reference material as possible. But I sort of, if you can kind of specialize a little bit, then you can kind of go, okay, I don't have the skills to draw absolutely everything in the world, but I do have the skills required to draw these set things, and I know that I can accomplish a good drawing of those things in a limited amount of time. So if somebody comes to me for a tattoo now of a plant, I know I can draw that in the spare time that I have, which is very limited. Whereas, sometimes people come to me for something different, and I recently did a piece on someone, or I've started a piece, it's definitely not finished yet, but it's all sort of medieval. It's super cool, but it's like a William Morris wallpaper kind of inspired sleeve with little marginalia kind of characters, these funny little mythological animals interspersed. Really fun, but incredibly time consuming to draw. And I just couldn't do that all of the time, because I have 3 kids and they all need a lot of attention, and my spare time is very limited to generally the hours after they go to sleep at night. So
you kind of went along, and like you were saying, it was just more happenstance, and you just learnt things along the way, and then one person comes around asking you for botanical, and then you just became the botanical tattoo artist. With the next generation, or the up and comers in the tattoo world now, are you seeing more of a niching, or is it just let's just get in the industry and then discover it, much like you have?
No, I think a lot of people are starting out having a niche, even as an apprentice, that they're sort of and look, my interaction with the tattoo community is actually quite limited, partly because I am first and foremost a mum, and I don't go to conventions. I don't work in a shop with other artists anymore, which I kind of feel a little bit sad about, actually. When I went to Melbourne recently and worked with a bunch of friends at a tattoo shop over there, it was really fun to work with other tattoo artists and bounce ideas off other people and stuff like that, and find out what inks they're using and what machines they like and whatever else. I'm not doing any of that anymore, so I'm very, because I just work alone, so I'm a little bit disconnected. But what I see on Instagram, which is basically where I see tattoos, is that, even young people who are very fresh in the industry have like a very specific style that they're pushing. And I mean, obviously every artist has it's maybe not obvious. I didn't have a niche when I started out. So when I was an apprentice, I just wanted to do tattoos, and there were tattoos that I liked more than others. But I loved Japanese tattooing, and I kind of had a love for lots of different styles because I love tattoos. And so it wasn't. There were certain things that I was maybe a bit more drawn to. In hindsight, I was always better at drawing plants than other things. So when people came to me for flowers, I was always better at doing that than I was at doing, say, Japanese. And when I was doing Japanese, if I was doing flowers or fish or kind of more nature-based imagery, I excelled at that more than, say, doing like a samurai or some other kind of non-nature related imagery. So I think your strengths are always there. It takes you a while to find them. But there wasn't really room to specialize when I started tattooing. The industry wasn't big enough, and there weren't enough clientele. We didn't have social media. You didn't have, so there were artists that I remember specializing, but they were sort of the best of the best sort of thing. They were the artists, like there was, a guy in Melbourne I went and got a sleeve off who was specialized in Japanese, but he was very well regarded, very well traveled. He was sort of, you did have these characters that specialized, but they were the minority, not the majority. And certainly in Adelaide, there were not that many tattoo shops doing custom work. A lot of the shops were sort of bikie-owned shops when I first started. It's not the case anymore, but it used to be the case. And so there weren't that many places doing custom work, and the people who were doing the custom work had to kind of do all of it. So, my boss, who taught me how to do, he did tribal, he did Japanese, he did portraits, he did the Americana kind of stuff, he did, I don't even know what you would call it now, but there was like a fairly new, people called it new school maybe, like a sort of a style of brightly coloured, almost cartoonish kind of stuff that people were getting a lot of at the time. He did everything because you had to. You didn't have, if you specialised, you would have just been,
Yeah, you're narrowing it a little bit too much. There's not enough of a market there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas now I think it's actually the rarity for someone to be a jack of all trades. I think most people now uh, do develop a sort of a niche, and there's enough of a client base to cater to that. I mean, I don't know how busy. You can't tell from looking at someone's Instagram how busy they are, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't know how many of these tattoos they're doing every week or whatever. But certainly, I think there is a much bigger slice of the pie for everyone now. Um, there are a lot of clients out there looking to get work, and I think most of those clients are looking to get custom work. Like I'm not even sure how many shops exist anymore where you can just go and get a tattoo done on the day. I feel like that's a rarity. That the shops
Yeah.
don't even really cater to that because it's not what people want. People want an artist who specializes in what they want to get, and they're going to do their research. Like with most with almost everything now, people do their research online before they go spend their money. Um, they're not necessarily just going to go to their local shop and say, "Hey, I'd like this kind of tattoo done. Who do you recommend?" Which is what people used to do when I started out. Someone would come in and go, "Well, if I want to get a Japanese sleeve, who's the best artist to do it?" And they would just ask us. They'd ask the tattoo shop, "Who do you recommend?" Whereas now everyone knows exactly who they're after before they even come in the shop, sort of thing. And so people are um, both the artists are specializing and the clients are looking for their specialists. So yeah, that's my
With so much of that, like with so much demand for tattoos, and the skills are absolutely incredible of the different tattooists out there. I remember you speaking about the apprenticeship, and how there's no real official way or any sort of standard for an apprenticeship. It's just a matter of a budding tattoo artist saying that I want to get into it. Now I have to find someone who's A, willing to take me, and B, has the skills to be able to instill that into me for me to be as good as them.
mm,
So it's interesting how that there still isn't a standardized, an officially recognized apprenticeship, is there?
no.
It's much more of it's a mentorship almost, isn't it?
It is, which I think is actually a nice thing. It might be
Hmm.
frustrating for someone who's trying to find an apprenticeship and can't find a mentor, which I think is often the case. That it's hard for people to find someone who's willing and able to teach them. Because the other thing is that's possibly harder now. I don't really know, but I would say when I was very lucky to get my apprenticeship when I did, because there weren't a whole lot of young people beating down tattooist doors to get apprenticeships. Like I think I was actually a lot of people found it very strange that that's what I wanted to do. It wasn't a common career that a young artist would seek out. And so I didn't have an awful lot of competition. So I said to my tattooist at the time that I was interested in becoming a tattoo artist. And he sort of said, okay, I'll keep that in mind, sort of thing. um, and, he liked my drawings. I was doing drawings to go and get tattooed on myself, mostly just so that I could show him that I could draw, because it was like rocking up with a nice drawing was a way of being like, hey, look what I can do. Um,
Mm.
so, so he knew I could draw, and, eventually an opportunity came up. It was about 3 years until an opportunity came up to work for him. But someone was leaving the shop, and I said, hey, do you want to replace that guy with an apprentice? And um, luckily for me, they did. But you know, I wasn't competing with a whole ton of other people. Whereas
Mm.
now I would imagine that I would be. Um, and so I think I got in at the right time before there was a real boom in the tattoo industry, and there were just tons of people wanting to do it. Um, but the other thing that you need as a tattoo apprentice is someone with an excess of work
Mm.
that they can pass on to you, so that you have opportunities to do tattoos, because you can't become a tattooist without tattoos to do. And so when I was young, what that meant was the shop that I worked for, my boss, who was a very accomplished tattoo artist, was doing the sleeves and the big custom work that was coming in. And then when someone came in for a little star on their wrist, or a little kanji, or some other little simple thing, an armband, whatever, that was my job. That was like, well, none of the custom tattoo artists want to do this. That's a job for the apprentice. Um, and so the junior artists in the shop did the easier, the walk-in pieces that didn't require a whole bunch of expertise and experience in custom drawing and stuff like that. But when people are seeking out accomplished artists for their custom piece, and they're not looking to come in and just get something off the wall anymore, you don't have those easy tattoos to pass on to the apprentice anymore.
Yeah.
So I've had people ask me if I can apprentice them, and I've sort of been like, I'm open to the possibility of doing it, but I don't know how I would teach you how to do tattoos without work that I can hand over to you. Because I don't get people coming to me for armbands and little simple things. I get people coming to me for big custom botanical pieces, and I can't palm that off onto an apprentice. So
No, and I'm sure that they're coming to you because they want you specifically as well.
usually, I mean, maybe not always though. I don't know. I'm not sure everybody
Mm.
really cares as long as they get a nice tattoo done. But certainly, I mean, there's always been a market for what people would now sort of call Pinterest tattoos, right? Like there are trends that go around like a classic one is like there's like an infinity symbol that is just really common. That's like the modern day kanji, the thing that everybody gets.
Yeah.
That first little, the tattoo they don't think very hard about, just the little thing that they get on their shoulder or their wrist or whatever. There are always going to be those tattoos that people aren't heavily invested in the imagery. They don't want a custom piece. They want to go get a little something just to get a tattoo, and that's fine. That's always been an element of the tattoo industry. But yeah, those people aren't coming to me, and they're not going to any other custom artist because they know that that's not what we do. And so I don't have those tattoos to then get an apprentice to do. So even if I was open to the possibility of apprenticing somebody, yeah, I don't even really know how it would work anymore. Because the other thing is, it's a huge investment in time for someone to teach an artist how to tattoo without there being some sort of return. So the way it used to work is that the guy that hired me, who owned the tattoo shop that I apprenticed at, had an excess of work and he needed somebody to do it. So it worked for him to have somebody inexperienced on board to pick up some of that slack. And I profited because I learned how to tattoo, and he profited because he made a little bit of money out of me. But yeah, I don't know how that would work. Like I don't have the capacity to get any sort of return on investment in time if I was to apprentice somebody. Yeah, I don't.
That's an interesting, yeah, it's an interesting dilemma because, like you were saying, that you came in at a time when, and I'm sure there would have been, your generation of tattoo artists, you would have come in at a time and hit it perfectly with the booming of tattoos. Not that you would have even been able to anticipate that.
No.
And then it came in at a time, but there's still going to be a shortage of artists. And it's not like any other kind of creative trade or expression where if you are any other kind of artist or a designer, you can start small. Like, me working as a brand designer, I could still help out people and just doing, like I did, like doing a logo design for peanuts and just give me some experience. Just let me have a go. If you don't like it, and that's fine. But like, you've got nothing at the moment, so just let me have a go. And if you don't like it, don't use it. That's fine. But like a tattoo, it's like it's there. It's not going away.
Yeah, people are maybe a little bit more hesitant to. I was actually amazed at how many people let me practice on them when I was an apprentice. I was pretty fortunate that I had a lot of people, including my husband, who let me practice on them. But I'd been working as a body piercer for a few years prior to that, and so I had people who already trusted me somewhat with their piercings. That was fortunate because some of those people that I'd been doing piercings on them, they then had enough trust in me when they turned 18 to go, oh, you can do my first tattoo for me. And some of them even just let me design tattoos for them without necessarily having me tattoo them until I was a bit better. But yeah, it is a bit of a dilemma that you have to learn somehow, and there's no way around the fact that some of your first tattoos while you're learning are not going to be your best tattoos.
Yeah.
And I mean that's when you're working in a shop, you can offer people a cheaper rate. There's always people who are happy to get an apprentice to do that tattoo.
For sure.
They get a cheaper rate. There's always someone. Not everybody values quality over everything else. And so, there's always people. And thankfully, most of the tattoos, I don't think I did anything too shocking. Had a picture and, yeah.
Still practicing on pigskins? Is that still a thing?
I did that. I did try tattooing some fruits and things. You can tattoo like pumpkins and oranges and things like that. So you can tattoo inanimate objects, and now actually you can get practice skin, which is quite expensive, but it's like a slab of silicone or something, some kind of stuff that is
Right.
similar to skin that you can practice tattooing on. So there are other ways other than just practicing on people. I think you still need the experience practicing on real people because there's no real substitute for that. But as far as just getting a feel for the machine and stuff like that, there are, non-human surfaces you can tattoo to get a feel for that. And I'm sure that that's what a lot of people are doing now. And some people practice on themselves. You can tattoo your own legs and things like that to learn how to tattoo as well. You might not really want to do that, but that's, some people do that. So
Have you?
Not to experiment. I have tattooed myself before, a couple of little ones,
Yeah.
but not to teach myself. Yeah, they were just little tattoos that I wanted to get that I probably wouldn't have ever gone and paid for. But
Is it a different? I mean, how different is that experience? Is it? I'd imagine it'll maybe hurt more. Does it hurt
it's
more?
not real fun. It doesn't hurt more, but it's more the fact that you're having to force yourself.
Inflict it on yourself.
Yeah, it's a little bit ripping a band-aid off. If mum does it for you, she just rips it off, whereas you're like, it's like pulling all the hairs and it hurts. And, so it's a similar sort of thing where you go in a bit tentative because when you push harder, it hurts more. And so you tend to hold back a little bit, and it's easier to have someone else do it for sure.
Yeah.
But if you're just doing little things, like I did a little one as a wedding anniversary tattoo on my own finger, and I did a matching one on my husband's finger. And they were just, it was just it was easier and quicker, and it was kind of romantic. I guess we kind of did them together. But, small tattoos can actually cost quite a lot of money. If you go have them done professionally, it's quite a lot cheaper for me to just use the ones myself.
Yeah, for sure, right? Because there's got to be like a minimum. I mean, it's not just the work, but there's a lot of setup, and so there is an absolute minimum that you have to pay regardless of how big or how small the tattoo is going to be.
Yeah, the investment in needles and everything else is the same for a tiny tattoo as it is for a big one. I mean, with something like a sleeve, you're going to be using multiple setups because you're going to have multiple sessions. But if you can set up 3 needles and your ink caps and all the rest of the covering everything in plastic for hygiene purposes and all that sort of stuff, and you can do a 5-minute tattoo, and that setup costs the same as it would be if you tattooed someone all day. You're going to go through a bit more ink and more paper towel and more gloves tattooing someone.
Yeah.
But all the rest of the investment is the same, To set up your bench and to pack it down again, the cost of the needles is exactly the same for, a small tattoo as it is for a big one. So it definitely makes more, like you have to charge more for little ones than you do for big ones at the end of the day. Yeah.
Relatively, of course.
Yeah. A big tattoo is going to cost you a lot of money. But you can't charge by the hour for a little tattoo because you wouldn't be making enough to cover your costs, sort of thing. So you charge a flat rate. Yeah.
So where can people find you on the socials? Where are you? Because so firstly, you are based in Adelaide. Whereabouts in Adelaide are you?
Yes, I am now. My studio is in a suburb called Door Park, which is fairly central. It's only sort of 10 minutes from the city. I share my studio with my husband, who is a picture framer, conservation picture framer and fine art printer. So he has the shop front and I have a private studio at the back. We're on Goodwood Road in Door Park, which is pretty central. And I'm on Instagram is where I mainly post. My Instagram auto post to my Facebook account, but I don't go to Facebook very often because I don't like it. So I basically am only really on Instagram. It's Amy Claire Duncan, all in one word. I think Amy Duncan is a really common name, so hard for finding handles on social media. But yeah, it's Amy Claire, Claire, Amy Claire Duncan on Instagram. And I've got a website, I've got a blog on there that I don't update very often and stuff like that. But that's the best place to find me is either my website, which is amycduncan.com, or Instagram, Amy Claire Duncan. And yeah,
definitely for those that are going to be seeing this, go check out her work. It is beautiful. Not just the tattoos, you do showcase occasionally. You will put up some of your illustrations as well, and they're spot on. They really like. It is hard to explain and articulate the type of aesthetic, but there is a nuance about them that isn't just explicitly seeing a botanical, and the details are polished, but there is a treatment in the color and in the composition that is quite striking, but subtly as well.
Yeah.
So Amy, thank you so much for your time. This has been a good
Oh,
conversation. I really, got a lot of good insights into, the industry
yeah,
and
cool.
how it shapes culture and how culture and the influence of both tattoos in culture and then culture and tattoos. So thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.